Hello, polar scientists. I am absolutely delighted to welcome you to our online children's spring lecture, Climate Change in Antarctica, Understanding the Science of the Sky. My name is Professor Mark Fellows, and I am Pro-Vice Chancellor and Professor of Ecology here at the University of Reading. This afternoon's lecture will be given by Dr. Ella Gilbert, a postdoctoral research assistant in our Department of Meteorology. Over the next 45 minutes, Ella is going to take you on an Antarctic adventure as she talks about her personal experiences of working in the coldest, driest, remotest continent on our planet. I hope you've all wrapped up warm. You will discover all about what it's like to be a climate scientist in Antarctica, one of the wildest and most unexplored places on Earth. Ella will also be revealing how the science of the sky helps us to better understand climate change and its effects. So expect to hear about aeroplanes, weather balloons, clouds, and much more. And you may be even lucky enough to spot a few penguins along the way. We are in very safe hands, as Ella has been researching Antarctic climate change for several years and spent 7 weeks working in Antarctica for the British Antarctic Survey while completing her PhD. Ella is a passionate speaker about Antarctic climate change, who has worked with schools and museums, including featuring in the Natural History Museum's Nature Live series of talks. She has also made appearances at festivals, on radio and television, and at high-profile events like the launch of the Royal Research Ship Sir David Attenborough. Before we start, just a quick note on timings for today's events. The lecture will last for 25 minutes, and we will then have some time for Ella to respond to questions from the audience. Please send us your questions in the Q&A box on the right-hand side of your screen at any point during the lecture, and we'll try to answer as many as we can before we finish at 5:15. And now I think it's time to set off on our exciting Antarctic journey, so it's over to you, Ella.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. It is an absolute pleasure to be here to talk to you all today about my favourite topic, Antarctic science. So as Mark said, I am going to take you on an adventure today, and we are going to go down south to Antarctica, and I will be showing you how we do science in the sky to understand Antarctic climate change. Now, we do want you to get involved, so make sure you think of all those questions as we go through the lecture and write them all down in the chat so we can answer them at the end. I also hope that you've had a chance to look at your workbooks, and you've got them at the ready so that we can go through some of the answers of those. Now, first things first, there was a little introduction, but hello, I'm Ella. I'm an atmospheric scientist, and I'm really interested in Antarctic weather and Antarctic climate change. Mark mentioned that I was lucky enough to go south, and going south is what we in the British Antarctic Survey use the lingo when you go down to Antarctica. I was lucky to go south to do research in Antarctica in 2017. And I was hoping that maybe you might like to come with me on an adventure to see what we get up to in Antarctica. So are you ready? I hope you're wearing your layers because it can be a little bit chilly. Okay, first things first, we have to get to Antarctica. So what I want you to do is take a plane as far south as you can on commercial aircraft. You might end up, if like me, you go via the British route, in a place called Punta Arenas in Chile. And there you might be met by some colleagues to arrange between you and your colleagues in Antarctica when they can come over and take you from South America all the way to Antarctica. Now, it's very dependent on the weather because Antarctica is pretty wild, so you might have to stay a few days in the hotel. And every morning you will wake up and you'll go and talk to the pilot, and the pilot will let you know whether the weather is safe enough for you to fly over the ocean to Antarctica. Sometimes you might be lucky and you can go that day, but other times you might have to wait a few days, maybe even a week, maybe even more. But when the pilot says it's safe to go, you are ready and you can head over to the special Antarctic plane just like this. Welcome to Antarctica. Here is the base where you're going to be staying. It's called Rothera and it's on the Antarctic Peninsula. And you eat all of your meals in this building here. It's also got a library, it's got a bar, it's got a games room, it's got computers so that you can write emails to your friends and families telling them about all the incredible science you're doing in Antarctica. And this building here, I thought I would point it out, is where we do all of our recycling. It's a little bit like you have a recycling bin at your home, except that inside that building we have 20 different bins instead of one. And we have that to separate all of the different things that we use, because we cannot leave any rubbish in Antarctica because we have to protect the environment because it's a really special place. So we're really good at separating it, making sure everything gets reused, and we take away anything that we do produce, any waste. So now you've been in Antarctica for a little while, you might have noticed that it is colder and windier here. In fact, it is a pretty harsh environment. And that means that animals in Antarctica are really specially adapted to that unique environment. Now, I've seen in the chat that some of you have posted already some animals that you thought of that you might see. So here are some of the ones that I thought of. One of the first animals you might see walking around the base at Rothera are some of these guys, and these are elephant seals. Now, they might look cute, but be warned, these guys are very, very stinky, so you might want to keep a wide berth. They're also absolutely gigantic, which you can't really tell from this picture, but each of them weighs about a ton. That's very heavy. Now, we also see all sorts of whales around Antarctica. This one is a southern right whale, and they love the waters around Antarctica because they are full of food and they are a great habitat and a great place to live for these whales. There's also lots and lots of types of bird. These ones are blue-eyed shags, and they come onto the rocky ground to lay their eggs and to nest. You can see the black fluffy ones. Those are the chicks that have just hatched, and the white and black ones are their parents. Now, if we delve deep under the waters, you'll see all sorts of different incredible, weird and wonderful deep sea creepy crawlies. And this is where the majority of Antarctic wildlife actually lives. We have a huge diversity of different animals under the water. And finally, the ones that I think you probably thought of first are penguins. So this is an Adelie penguin. They're very small and they're very cute, but we have lots of different species or types of penguins in Antarctica. And you will almost certainly meet some penguins on your adventure. So here is a video of a penguin that I made friends with when I was there. Fantastic. So now you've seen lots of animal species, it's time to look up and look at what's in the sky. So just like we have species of animal in Antarctica, we also have species of cloud. And maybe you've already had a go at the quiz in the workbook trying to match the species of clouds to the pictures, but just in case you haven't, we're going to have a look at the different cloud species now. So the first type is a cirrus cloud, and cirrus is the Latin word for feather. And these clouds, I think they look very feathery, they're quite wispy and stripy, and they are quite blurry around the edges. The second type of cloud is cumulus, and this means heaped, and it looks like there's lots of bits of cloud piled up on top of each other, and I think it looks a little bit like a cauliflower. Now, the third species of cloud is stratus, and stratus means layer or flat, and we often see these as a kind of one solid colour across the whole sky. So in the UK, in winter mostly, we often see this as a big grey sky, might be drizzling on you. So that's usually a stratus cloud. Now, hopefully you've had a go at guessing these from your workbooks, but if you haven't, don't worry, because you can still play along. And now it is your turn to guess that cloud. Okay, fantastic. First question. I'll give you a moment to think about this. What do you think this cloud is? Remember, there are three options. We have cirrus, we have cumulus, and we have stratus. Hopefully, you will have guessed that this is a cumulus cloud. It looks like it's got lots of bits of cloud piled up on top of each other. That's why we know it is a cumulus. Next one looks quite different. Very wispy, it's a cirrus cloud. Okay, next one. This one, the whole sky is pretty much the same colour. And to me, this looks very much like a stratus. What's this one? This is the fourth of five. It looks quite similar to one we've already had. It's wispy, it's feathery. Yes, it's a cirrus cloud. And then finally, our last cloud. I'm hoping you've got this one right. It's a lovely example of a nice cumulus cloud with lots of different bits of cloud piled up on top of each other. So well done if you got all of those right. And remember, you can play this game anytime you like, on your own, whenever and wherever you are. You can just look outside, out the window and play Spot That Cloud. It's one of my favourite games on a train. So now you've been here for a little while, you might have noticed that it is very windy and very cold in Antarctica. But did you know that Antarctica is also the largest desert? It's so cold here that it is the largest desert on Earth because the air is much less humid. But do you know what the coldest temperature ever recorded was? In Vostok, which is the Russian station in the East Antarctic, on July the 21st, 1983, a temperature of minus 89.2 degrees Celsius was recorded. That is mind-blowingly cold. Very, very, very cold. In fact, it's about 5 times colder than your freezer. And I wouldn't recommend that you spend very much time in your freezer, because aside from anything else, you might get fish fingers stuck in your hair, and nobody needs that. So, I hope you brought your woolly hats with you. Would you like to see what I took to Antarctica with me to wear? I'm hoping the answer is yes, because here is a picture of my kit bag. These bags are ginormous. Mine weigh 23 kilos, but it is essential to take all of the stuff that you need to bring with you to stay safe and warm. So on top of all of the clothes that you would wear normally day to day at home, you also have to take all of your thermal gear. So you'll have thermal tops, thermal bottoms, you'll have lots of woolly socks, hats, scarves, you have fleeces and jumpers to go over the top. Over the top of that, you might have a windbreaker jacket or a light outdoor jacket. If you're going somewhere very cold in the winter, perhaps you have a very deep winter jacket that's very thick and warm. You need your work trousers, you need some work boots. If you're going out somewhere very snowy, you might also need snow boots, which we call baffin boots as well. Now in Antarctica in the summer, it is sunny, even in the middle of the night. It's 24 hours of daylight, so you're going to need to take some sunglasses with you to protect your eyes. You might even need some snow goggles, you might need a balaclava, and you also are definitely going to need some gloves. So thin gloves, thick gloves, big mittens, all of those things. And these are all really essential for keeping us warm. Now, if, like me, you are an atmospheric scientist and you're coming on an airborne research campaign, so you're going out flying in the aircraft, you will also need to wear something called an immersion suit. And this is a series of pictures showing you exactly how difficult it is for me to get in and out of one of these. And they are really helpful for keeping us safe and warm and dry. It's a little bit like a wetsuit that you wear to go diving or snorkeling or something. It's got a rubber seal around your wrists and your neck and your ankles so that no water can get in. But it also means you have to wrestle yourself in and out of them. So for your delight, I have included some pictures to show you how difficult it is to get in. Now, I thought you might like to also try this yourself. So to get the real Antarctic Explorer experience, you can try and do this at home. So maybe you can put on a pair of oven mitts. Here's some I prepared earlier. I'm going to do the whole full Explorer experience myself. And wearing all of these clothes in Antarctica makes it very difficult to do everyday tasks. So for example, turning a door handle or even writing your name can be quite tricky. So I've got a pen. I'm going to try and do that exactly. And you can try this later at home. It's proving hard. Ta-da! So that's a task for you all to do at home, wearing your Antarctic gear. Now, I know that all of you have come on this adventure to help us to measure Antarctic weather. And there are so many different ways that we can do this. And some of them are here. One of them is to use weather stations, and we put these out on the ice and they can measure the weather and the atmosphere, things like how sunny it is, how cold it is, that sort of thing. Then there's also the aircraft that we can use, and this aircraft is called a twin otter. And we put all sorts of different scientific instruments on it. So we might have a thermometer to measure temperature. We have cloud probes to measure the clouds that we're flying through, something called a hygrometer to measure humidity, so how much water's in the air. And you might have already had a go at guessing where on the plane these instruments get fitted in your workbooks. Now, the last one is a weather balloon, which is also known as a radio sonde. And radio sondes measure all sorts of things about the atmosphere. So they measure temperature, which is how hot or cold the air is. They measure humidity, how much water's in the air. They measure pressure, so how much air is above us. And they measure winds, so how that air is moving around, essentially. And they measure this in this kind of packet of sensors you can see on the left there. We attach them to a balloon and we fill that balloon with helium. And then we let go of the balloon and it goes up through the atmosphere. And this is the only time I can think of where letting go of a balloon is a happy occasion and not a sad one. And it goes up through the atmosphere and it has a lovely time and sends all the information back down to us on Earth. And it means that we can plot all of that information, put it onto a graph, and you can see that on the bottom right-hand corner. You may be able to tell that I drew that one myself. So I'm hoping that you will help me release a weather balloon now.
Welcome to our very glamorous Met office here at Rotherham. Just come from the Met brief. So the first thing to do after the first air of the day is to release the sonde. Sneak out the door, get it caught, ready to go. Bye.
Now, all of the work that we do in Antarctica helps us to understand climate change, and you might have heard that also called global warming. So if we measure the weather every single day for many years at a time by releasing weather balloons or by flying through the atmosphere, we can make graphs that look a bit like this one. And this graph shows you average global temperatures over very many years, and blue colours show that the Earth is cooler, red colours show that the Earth is warmer. And what we can see is that temperatures have been steadily rising because of human activities that use fossil fuels. And that's changing the unique environment that the animals that we see are living in, and it's making it harder for them to survive. And in fact, the polar regions, Antarctica included, are warming more than the rest of the world, and climate change there will actually impact us all over the planet. So it's not just penguins that care about climate change. It should matter to all of us, because if Antarctic ice melts and we start seeing kind of rivers of melting water flowing off the Antarctic ice sheet, then that contributes to sea level rise, which affects all of us. And on the left, we've got a map of what Central Europe would look like if all the ice in Antarctica melted. And you can see that it would change where the coastlines are, and that would make a big difference to people who live near them, myself included. I definitely live in a place that is underwater on this map. So we all need to care about climate change. Besides, climate change doesn't just happen in the polar regions. It influences the whole world's weather and climate. So the hottest 10 years have all been in the last 2 decades, and it shows that the planet is heating up. In the UK, warmer temperatures mean hotter, drier summers and wetter, warmer winters. So unfortunately, that means fewer chances of making snow people in the winter and much more rain, and also lots more hot, dry, drought days. And as the climate changes, that also makes our weather more extreme, so there are more dangerous events like floods and heat waves. But even though climate change is quite scary, scientific research is really important for helping us to prevent it. And fieldwork in the polar regions helps us to understand what's going on so that we can begin to fix it. So I really want to thank you all for coming on this adventure to do some science in the sky, because this is a really important part of how we fix climate change. And speaking of which, before we go home, I wanted to take you on one last adventure. So let's go on a science flight in the Twin Otter aircraft. Make sure you're wearing your orange immersion suit and that your seat buckle is on, fingers in your ears, because it can get bumpy and very loud. I hope you're ready to come home now and do some of your own science too. And don't forget, you can always play the cloud spotting game wherever you are and whatever you're doing. But I also hope that you will help me to protect the amazing environment and all the animals in Antarctica, and to help prevent further climate change by doing some really simple things. And I've put some ideas here, but these are not exhaustive, of course. So it's not. There's lots more you can do as well. So some ideas include making less waste, so throwing away less food, trying to reuse and recycle more things. So instead of throwing things away when they break, trying to fix them or reuse them. Eating less meat is a really great way to reduce our impact on the environment. Switching to more sustainable types of transport, for example, cycling, walking, taking public transport to school or work instead of driving, and then taking the train instead of flying on your holidays, for instance. Then other things we can do, so in the home, perhaps you can turn the thermostat down on laundry or your central heating, or ask your parents or guardians to do that. We can also write to get involved in campaigns. So charities have things that they can do to promote solutions to climate change, writing to your local MP. And I think that one of the most important ones is talking about climate with all of your friends and family and helping to encourage them to do some of these solutions. So remember, every single one of your actions counts and is all really helpful in fighting climate change. So tell us, what will you do to make a difference? Tell us in the comments, let us know what you're already doing to protect the environment, what you might change in future. Really looking forward to hearing all of your suggestions and your amazing ideas. So with that, I think that's the end of our adventure. Welcome home. And if you've got any questions, now is the time.
Ella, that was absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed that. And as somebody who spent a lot of time in the tropics, I feel like I've missed out by never having gone somewhere so far south or north and cold. There are some wonderful questions here in the chat, so I'm going to pick them out, and I'm sorry to those where I won't be able to get to everybody, but I'm going to try and pull them together into some themes. The first is some sort of, there were questions, actually practical questions, and there was a really nice one about, you're in the Antarctic, why would you need sunglasses?
It's a great question. It's not immediately obvious why you would need sunglasses. Part of it is because when we go, well, particularly when I went in the summer, and lots of the research that we do in the Antarctic has to be in the summer because it's warmer, it's easier to get there. But also we have 24 hours of daylight. So it means that you have many more opportunities to do the research that you want to do. So for example, if you're going out flying in a Twin Otter, you want it to be daylight so that you can make sure it's as safe as possible. You can't do that in the winter because it's 24 hours of darkness. So in summer, when it's 24 hours of daylight, you're surrounded by white. There's lots and lots of reflection of the sun coming right into your eyes. You're also very far south, so you just get lots and lots of solar radiation, and it can be quite damaging to your eyes. So you definitely need your sunglasses. It's a bit like skiing, if anyone has ever done that. I haven't, but I'm told.
Well, at least we know when if we're ever fortunate enough to go somewhere like you visited, we know to wear the right kit. Snoods and balaclavas are very popular in the questions. I'm now going to ask my favourite question that was put here, and I think it's a slightly unfair question. You might not be able to answer it, but I'd never thought about this before until the question was asked, and now I'm never going to be able to look at Antarctica in the same way again. Why does Antarctica look like a rhino?
Does it? I'm going to turn around and look at my map.
It does. There's a horn. It's like the head of a rhino.
Maybe. Yeah. No. I'm with that. I'm with you with that. No explanation, but
just good fortune. Then.
Yeah, good fortune.
We're good at seeing patterns.
Coincidence, let's say.
Just like we can see, we can describe clouds as being like feathers. We could describe Antarctica as looking a little bit like a rhino. I think that bit is the British bit, isn't it? The bit that the peninsula coming out, that's the horn. on that, thinking of my very poor grasp of global geography.
It is. I mean, technically it's nobody's and everybody's, but it is the bit where the British have their stations, yes.
Thank you. That's important. That is important.
It's a
Right,
scientific continent for all.
Quite right. So moving on then. So Antarctica itself, is it fully made of ice?
So underneath Antarctica is rock. It's a big rocky continent like any other type of land, but it's covered in this ice sheet. 99.9% of it pretty much is covered in ice. In some places it's 4 kilometers thick, that ice, but on average it's I think 2.7 kilometers thick, very, 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 very thick, and then snow on the top.
So thank you for that. So I'm going to move on to a few questions about pollution. So early on there were questions around how litter gets to Antarctica. How do we stop that sort of pollution? I guess some of that will be about people visiting, but a large part will be about what's happening in the oceans.
Yeah, so partly there is obviously waste produced by doing research, which is why we have to be really, really careful about recycling and waste disposal. And any activity in Antarctica is governed by the Antarctic Treaty, and all the signatories, so all the countries who've signed up to the Antarctic Treaty, agree to leave Antarctica in its pristine form. So any waste or rubbish that you produce, you have to take it away. So the scientific operations are all very tightly controlled, and all of the countries that operate make sure that they completely minimize all of their environmental impact in terms of the waste. The oceans component is a slightly more complex one because you can't really control what comes in from the ocean, and you know, our oceans connect the entire globe. So something that starts its life in, I don't know, Europe could eventually end up down south in the Southern Ocean in theory. So that is a global problem, and we need to stop using so much single-use plastic and throwing so much horrible rubbish into the oceans.
And that's great.
Easier said than done, of course.
Of course, and it fits really very nicely with what you were saying towards the end of your presentation about how everybody can make a difference in terms of global climate change and the wider sort of threat to the environment. It really does fit in there. There were some really nice questions about the balloon that you sent up, and some include comments about how impressively enormous that balloon is. There was a question about whether you get the balloon back or does it disappear? Can you recycle the balloons? How do you get the signals, and how do you use it to tell the weather?
Excellent questions. Yeah, the balloons are actually really huge, and they start that size at the surface, and as they go up through the atmosphere they get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until they expand so big that they pop. And that unfortunately means that usually we cannot retrieve them. In Antarctica, often either they fall down into the ocean or they fall down into the middle of the kind of wild Antarctic ice sheet, places where, you know, someone has never set foot. So it is actually quite difficult to retrieve them, unfortunately. I think there is a company that's working on making them biodegradable, which is really cool. So that's a work in progress. But at the minute, we can't usually retrieve them. If it's possible, then we will, and we do. But generally speaking, unfortunately, we can't. And they transmit all of the information using a radio signal, and it's that tiny little packet of, it's, you know, the size of my hand, and it's got all this information about 4 basic things about the atmosphere that we can use to tell so many different things. It's really fascinating. I mean, even just like a GPS sensor like you might have on a phone tells you about the winds and the altitude and all of that, and it's yeah, it's all sent straight back down to Earth. It's very, very cool.
Yeah, and you showed this fantastic picture. I mean, well, fantastic probably isn't the right word. It's a really clear illustration of how temperatures are warming up in Antarctica, and there were questions around the rate that that's happening. Do we know anything about that? Is the sort of data you're collecting helping us understand that?
Yeah, I mean, shout out to Ed Hawkins for the graph. It's a really, really amazing visualization, and all the climate stripes campaign is really, really great. We know that the rate of warming is really unprecedented, unseen before. It's really, really a lot faster than any other time in our history, as far as we can tell. In the polar regions, I mean, the Antarctic Peninsula, the Rhino Horn, was warming at the fastest rate of anywhere on the planet for a while, and the Arctic is the same. The Arctic has warmed twice as much as the rest of the planet so far. And all of the information that we're collecting through a variety of techniques, not just weather balloons, but also, weather stations and satellites in space, and other instruments that we have in the polar regions, aircraft observations, all of these scientific techniques are helping us build a picture about how fast that's happening, and it is in the polar regions happening much faster than anywhere else.
I'm going to shift us on a little bit now. We had a few questions about penguins. People like penguins.
People like penguins. Everyone likes a penguin.
Yeah,
Who doesn't like a penguin?
Penguins are absolutely awesome, and there was a question. There were questions around how many penguins were there. There are a lot around where you were staying, and why can't penguins fly?
Oh my God! Asked me to reveal my ignorance as an atmospheric scientist about penguin biology. The first one I'll tackle, because I do know the answer to this. There wasn't that many, because the scientific base is not near a penguin colony where they live. You see the odd penguin, and they kind of come on shore, and they have no predators on land, so they're so unafraid, which is why they'll just come up to you and try and get involved and try and do some science with you. Like, hey, I want to do some measuring. Can I get involved, please? But yeah, you see the odd one or two unless you go and visit an actual penguin colony. And why they can't fly, I don't know. I think it's because they're really good at swimming underwater.
As a zoologist, I could I could give you the answer, but I think that's not my job here today. It's all about you. So moving on then, I think we've got time for probably just one or two other questions. There was a really interesting couple of questions about the flight. So how long does it take you on the Twin Otter to get there? And is there an issue about pollution? You're actually flying to somewhere, and we think about climate change and flights. How do you sort of match those two things up together?
Really, really good point. So in terms of the scientific flights, you have to start at the base with a runway, so Rothera, and you have this trade-off between having more scientific instruments and more scientists on board versus how much fuel you can take. So usually when we were doing it, it was competition to get the most instruments and the lightest people on board, so you could fit more fuel, so you could do a longer science flight. And you end up squished in this tiny cabin surrounded by scientific instruments on all sides. And there's only you, the pilot, and one other person in the back. And you fly around. As probably the round trip is about 5 hours for the longest. I did a few flights that were 3 hours or so, but it takes an hour to kind of get over the mountains if you're going on one side and flying over the oceans. It also really depends on the weather. In terms of the sort of trade-off between the pollution and the research, for me, it's a really important question, because if we're talking about climate change and we're recommending that people, don't fly to take holidays and they take the train instead, but then here we are in a little plane flying around in Antarctica, we have to make sure that it's worth it, essentially. And we have maybe 40 flights ever conducted from Rothera, and it's something we still don't know. There's so many unknowns when we're talking about particularly clouds, but also other parts of atmospheric science in Antarctica. There is so little data and information recorded from these atmospheric flights. At the moment, we're getting a huge amount of information and brand new knowledge from every single flight. So it's, on balance, very worth doing these single flights to collect information. I mean, if we get to a point where we've got loads and loads of data, we don't need any more, it would probably cease to be relevant or important. But at the moment, it is such a crucial tool for improving our understanding that, yeah, I think on balance it is worth it.
Okay. Now, just for the last few minutes, I'm going to sort of try and flick through odd questions, which will sort of scatter around a bit, and I think they'll probably have short answers. But before I do that, I hope. Before I do that, though, I just want to say Eliza answered the question in the chat about why penguins can't fly, and so that's excellent. So thank you very much, Eliza. So, as I said, quick fire. Are there puffins?
No, I didn't see any.
No is the correct answer because Northern Hemisphere. Why can't you put a tracker or attach a rope to your massive weather balloon? I mean, I can imagine you letting that weather balloon go and holding a rope holding onto a rope at the other end and seeing how far you go with it. That would be one way.
Might be quite hair raising. Remaking Up the movie. Yeah. Well, we do have a tracker on it, and that's how we record the winds. But it's just the retrieving it that's the issue.
And I can't remember. Did you say how high up the balloons go?
Oh, on a good day, 20,000 kilometers. 20,000 kilometers. 20 kilometers.
Yeah. So 20 kilometers. That rope would have to be exceptionally long.
Exceptionally long, yeah.
Right. So just moving up, Nishad asked, which plants grow there? Did you see many?
Very few, because it's so icy. You get lots of mosses and lichens on the sub-Antarctic islands.
Okay, and there's a question about asking how cold is the water in Antarctica?
Ooh, good question. So water, you get sea ice on the top of the ocean when it gets to about minus 1.86 degrees Celsius. So it doesn't get very much colder than that. Okay.
And Khaled has asked a question that I think is a brilliant question. Are there any dinosaur fossils in Antarctica?
Yes, great question. Two of my favorite things, Antarctica and dinosaurs. Yeah, Antarctica used to be a forest, and there are very many dinosaur fossils in Antarctica. It's incredible. It's mind blowing to think that there used to be no ice and covered in dense foliage.
Quite amazing, isn't it? How the world has changed over all these millions of years. Right, I'm looking at time, and I suspect we're coming to the end. I don't have much time, so what I'm going to do is, rather than go on to another question, I just wanted to say that the comments in the chat that people put in were absolutely brilliant. There was such a wide range of things there, and people, Ella, loved your talk. There was such positive feedback, and yeah, penguins clearly are perhaps the most favourite popular animal in Antarctica. Even though elephant seals, we shouldn't miss out on those because they are absolutely awesome as well. So I think that's all we have time for today. I want to thank Dr. Ella again for that fascinating lecture. You were a star. And thank you for everybody who listened, to you, all our polar scientists out there in the audience, for those excellent questions. I really enjoyed those. Some of them were just great fun, so thank you. If you're interested in this, you want to share it with other people, you want to remind yourself of how to tell the clouds apart so you can become weather watchers and meteorologists in the future, there's going to be a recording of this lecture, and so the events team will be in touch over the next few days to let you know how you can get in touch with this. And I just wanted to thank everybody for joining us, and I hope you have a really fantastic evening. So thank you again, Ella. That's just been brilliant. And goodbye, everybody.